Either you make a move, he said as he turned off the gun's safety, or I will. In a city where over 50% of the population are cyborg psychopaths, the average person doesn't spend much time downtown if they can help it. And as I stared down the barrel of the third gun this week, I can't say I blame them. I was here every other weekend, but I'll admit this is the first time the odds have been stacked against me this badly. I was trying to get my bearings, but this guy in the front just won't stop talking. He's going on and on about people coming onto his turf and not respecting the boss. The idea that any group of people would lay claim to this literal dumpster pile was absurd, but something told me he wasn't thinking clearly anymore. 5 people? No, 6. They were all talking at once, but I couldn't tell if they were looking to participate in any violence or just waiting for the show to start. I started to think about what my options were. I was looking for gear, not a fight. De-escalate? I told him I was just leaving. Did I say you could leave? All right, well, there goes that idea. He really wanted a fight. Not a fair fight, of course. Can't have that. I tried to think my way through the problem. Tried was the operative word, since these 6 idiots wouldn't stop talking. They all stopped talking and stared at me. Wait, did I just say that last part out loud? Well, so much for de-escalating the Did you just call us idiots? A single light illuminated the alley, and if I timed it just right... Oh, now you don't have anything to say? I started to ask them to listen and overloaded the light. Darkness. But I knew better than to stand still. I dodged to the left and had a split second before any technicians with night vision could react. I couldn't permanently disable everyone's tech, but I could buy myself a few minutes. A jamming signal was pretty hard to generate since it ran the risk of jamming your tech too, but I'd worked on it for the last year to improve my skill, and judging by everyone's frustration, it looked like it had paid off. I couldn't wait to see if the other 5 techs were going to join the fight. I had to assume they were already part of it. The only one behind me was staring right at me and took on a fighting stance. I put my fists up and he started to say something. I'll never know what he was going to say because I sent my vial of quicksilver straight through his chest. As he crumpled to the ground, I heard someone yell and knew that the techs behind me had regained their vision. The simpler technology was, the easier it was to reset. Vision? Not super complex these days. Internal weaponry? Much more complicated. I had about 30 seconds, give or take. At 5 seconds, I'd aimed my quicksilver at the ringleader's chest, but he must have blocked it with his gun somehow. At least that bought me some time before he started firing away. At 10 seconds, the other techs had empowered themselves with natural electricity. That was actually pretty clever, since it's not hackable, so I decided to follow their lead. I backed up out of the alley as one of the techs was swinging wildly at me. At 15 seconds, I realized I was running out of time. They'd be weapons hot soon, and it was still a massively lopsided fight. How could I make this into a one-on-one fight if... The alley! At 20 seconds, I stopped backing up. I saw that my quicksilver was all over the gun, so I called it to me as I slipped one of the tech's punches, and found that the gun was in my hands now. I fired on the tech before he knew what had happened. Wow, these guys didn't have much internal armor, did they? At 25 seconds, the remaining 4 guys were rushing towards me. I turned to fire into them, and the first tech dodged. The second tech's internals must have come online because he seemed to sidestep the bullet before he even realized it had been fired. The third guy's internal tech hadn't rebooted yet, so he crumpled to the ground. At 30 seconds, everyone's tech was back online except for the ringleader, who seemed to be ranting and raving about monsters and demons. No idea what that's all about. Dealing with 3 angry techs was still a bit much for me, but my jammer would be recharging for the rest of the day. To make matters worse, my quicksilver was getting too unstable and impure to keep being used. I called it into the purification tank and was down to the gun, natural electricity, and a piece of tech I refused to use in a crowded metropolitan area. Before I could start planning what to do next, the 3 men fell down, screaming in agony. Did my jammer mess with their internals? Maybe they were more cobbled together than I expected. "Are you all right?" said a voice from above me. I looked up, a few stories above me in a fire escape, and saw an older woman looking back at me. I started to respond, but said that I couldn't quite hear her over the screaming. She stepped off the fire escape and hit the ground like a ton of bricks, but walked it off and started approaching me. I couldn't even begin to imagine how complex her internals were. We started chatting, but she asked me to excuse her for a minute. She waved her hand toward the techs and they kept screaming, but it was completely silent. My head was spinning. Was it reality engineering? Maybe some kind of maximum threshold for volume? Or was she using neural system tech to turn off their voices? Either way, anyone with tech this complex shouldn't even know how to find this place, let alone be here. She was terribly polite, apologizing for interrupting my fight. She said there was just so much noise outside her window, and she typically wanted to enjoy the peace and quiet. I chuckled a bit at her joke until I realized she wasn't being ironic at all. Peace and quiet? What the heck was she talking about? Downtown had so much noise pollution that people slept underground if they could afford it. We kept talking a bit, and she told me she was impressed I was able to hold my own with such little. I told her I'd learned to get by, and she nodded solemnly. She asked me about my tech tree, and I told her that I'd worked with technomancy. Apparently, her father had been a technomancer many years ago. She asked me if I'd managed to figure out the jammer tech just yet. I told her I was surprised that she was familiar with our tech tree like that, but that I hadn't. She suggested that I stop trying to build a jammer that doesn't jam my tech, and instead focus on building a directional jammer. Much easier to build, she said. And I could build multiple of those, she added. I can't believe I never thought of that. As we made our way to the main street, she started to excuse herself and wish me a good night, and I started to do the same. I made it about 10 feet away when a crazy idea occurred to me. I turned back around and called out to her. I'm sorry, I know this is probably a strange request, but is there any chance you'd be interested in tech consulting? It was a ridiculous idea. This was clearly an incredibly talented technician who'd honed her mind in tech for decades. Still, I had to go for it. I'd be happy to pay you for your time if you'd be willing to, I said, but she interrupted me. She looked at me with what I can only describe as a mixture of pride and pity before responding. I'm not really interested in your money, darling. Well, it was worth a shot. I started to walk away, but she continued. But I'm curious, what's your end goal here? I'm guessing you're not planning on scavenging for the rest of your life. Normally, I wouldn't dream of answering that question honestly. I mean, I lived off junk sales and was basically a minor inconvenience away from getting killed off screen by some guy who called himself Razor Knife or something. But you know what? Why not? I want to be a top-tier technomancer. I think technomancy gets a bad rap because the skill ceiling's so high, but I genuinely think it's some of the strongest tech there is, if I could just get my hands on the right tech. I trailed off. Well, that's silly. Ouch. I figured it was coming, but I didn't think she'd be so direct. Why would you have to wait for the right tech when you're a technomancer? I didn't really understand the question. Technomancy was the manipulation of tech, internal and otherwise. I couldn't build something exceptional without exceptional components and told her so. Interesting, she said, more to herself than anyone else. I tell you what, I told her my name was Kento. Mr. Kento. I don't know if I'd be much of a consultant, but I do have something I think you'd be interested in seeing. My HUD pinged as she dropped me a contact card. She told me that she'd have to make a few calls, but that she wanted to show me something uptown this weekend. I was too stunned to speak as she started going on about the details. As she started to walk away, I called out and told her that I didn't have a ride uptown. I heard her laugh. She turned to face me as she kept walking and said, "We'll pick you up, darling. Good night." I yelled good night back and started my short walk home.